name is Jennifer. That's my son in the video you just said.
Hey, Jennifer, girl, I saw you deleted the video, but I made a copy of it because I wanted to come back to it so I could see what I could uncover in this thing. So go on, do your thing, girl.
This is Bo.
I do not appreciate people videoing without my permission.
Well, I understand that, but...
Now, Jennifer, why is Bo so aggressive right here? He didn't appear to be aggressive when he was over there with Miss Shonda. So I'm just a little bit confused as to why is he so aggressive right now.
Explain what happened.
Basically, we were in the park and we were trying to watch a movie for family time. We both got in me and my sister got in an argument over a pillow, so we were trying to leave. I refused to because I thought that it wasn't fair.
Okay, so Bo refused to leave. You leave him sitting over here. Okay, I got it. Come on with it.
And then when it happened, I thought they'd leave me because I found that I was confused by a vehicle that looked identical to theirs.
So he was confused by a vehicle that looked identical to y'all's, but he didn't want to leave. So why would he be chasing after another vehicle that looked identical to y'all's? And then he ended up keep walking down the road. I don't know, but keep carrying on.
Yeah. Well, we went ahead and decided to start packing up. Our car was less than 20 feet from where he was sitting. So me and his siblings started packing up the car. I came back towards where he was at. My husband met me over there, and I was like, well, where's Bo? And he said, I thought he was with you. I said, no. He said he didn't want to come with me. So I left him over there.
See, now, Jennifer, that's where you lying. Bo said he didn't want to come with you. So you grabbed your stuff and went to the car to pack your stuff up. Because remember, y'all was leaving, right? You ain't never left him over there with no stuff. You done went and packed the stuff up in the car, remember? You left.
So guys, I was watching this video on TikTok and also Instagram about this kid who has autism, and he was like abandoned by his family during like family movie night, and it looked like maybe it was at like a drive-in theater or something like that. And the other part of it was that you know, like he got lost and he was actually talking to some people because he just didn't know where to go. And the story was that, what happened was that he and his sister got in an argument over a pillow, and he was being stubborn about leaving. And it kind of is almost like maybe his family lied, or his mother lied and said, he was either lost or they couldn't find him or something like that, really. And there was also like a follow-up video where Bo, the kid, and Jennifer, the mom, appear, and he's saying things like he doesn't like being recorded and other things like that. And we all know it's a little different when, it's a kid and their parent on the television, on a video camera together, because obviously kids are not going to be as honest, really, because they know that their parents there to be like, okay, you know what, this is what we're going with, and if you go against me, we're just gonna delete the video and do it again until they get their way, really. So there's a bunch of things to talk about with this. That first of all, I've been around people with mental health issues my entire life. I do work in a hospital psychiatric ward, so I'm around like patients in the physical hospital and then in the psychiatric hospital. So I can understand how it is frustrating to have people with mental health issues. You can have children that are very defiant. You can have children that scream and argue all the time. You can have children that get violent. You can have children that get petty over things. You can have like children who are going to need help their entire life. So that means you're not a parent until they're 18. You're a parent until when you pass away. So I can understand like how frustrating it is, and then also the other side of it is that sometimes people feel like where does discipline come into line when you have a kid with a disability? Because there are people like Helen Keller, because the story about Helen Keller was before she worked with the miracle worker, was that she was allowed to do whatever she wanted. And there's plenty of kids who have mental health issues and their parents just don't care about what they do. And sometimes, and this is true, the other siblings are told to tolerate the behavior of the mentally ill kid. And that's never good, because you're going to teach the kid they can do whatever the fuck they want through their life. And then there are people who try to find middle ground. They believe that, okay, well, I spank my regular child and I spank my autistic child where they're all equal, and a lot of people agree with that. And then there's also people who do very harsh, forms of discipline. Like they may take advantage of the kid, like in the situation where they abandon him, and maybe he's being manipulated. There are parents who use emotional abuse and manipulation, like I've seen, or there's parents that use domestic violence or threatening or intimidation, and then they're like, oh, well, my kid has a learning disability, they're a liar, or they see reality differently, and then people believe the kid is insane, and they believe everything the parent does when actually the parent's actually doing things to the kid, really. Or there's also like shaming and other things like that. And again, as somebody who's misdiagnosed with autism, the last two examples, unfortunately, is what I've dealt with, really. But what I would also kind of say is, I want to talk about this. That first of all, I know that one thing that many parents do is that when they have a kid that's throwing a tantrum in the store, even like 4 or 5 year olds, they'll walk away, really, because the kid's eventually going to come back to the family, because they're like, oh, well, I don't want to be abandoned, separation anxiety. And I think that that's what his mother was trying to do, really. But I do think when you get to a point of everybody packing up and then driving a little bit away, and then the kid runs and then they catch up, that's harsh, but that's okay, really. But when you're actually just abandoning your kid, that's when a problem starts, really. And I know that some people do that. Like I remember watching that movie with Will Smith where he was the father of Serena and Venus Williams. Like that's an example of bad behavior, even though they didn't have like a disability. Like you're going to abandon your 2 daughters on the streets of LA where they can be, and in a prior scene they were being hit on by somebody else, really. So that's an example of why you don't do that, is because somebody can sexually assault or take advantage of your kid. The next thing that can happen is if you have a kid with a disability, they could be taken advantage of physically, sexually, or something else. Like what would happen to this guy if Bo got picked up by Herbert the pervert, or what would happen if, and there's some videos of this where there's some people with mental illnesses and they're being, and people who are in gangs would be aiming guns at them, putting guns in their mouth, pistol whipping them, beating them, and whatever, because they're like, oh, well, he has a mental illness, we can kind of whoop his ass a bunch of times. Or what would happen too, or if he didn't know where to go and he got further lost or lost in the woods. And I've been to Texas, there's a lot of animals and bushes or whatever, really. So it is, child endangerment, really. So the whole entire well, we're gonna ditch you and we're gonna forget about you, or we're not gonna pay attention to you. We're gonna be like, oh, well, maybe you got another ride home or whatever, really. It's just a way for the parent to ditch their kid and not take responsibility. For example, that happened to me when I was a kid. Like my parents forced me to walk 6 miles from Guilford High School all the way to Bishop's Orchards during the hot summer days. And I also made a video about the time that my dad forced me to get milk, a gallon of milk, walk all the way from Guilford High School to Walmart, 8 or 9 miles, really. And, my dad makes $100,000 a year, really. So, I told people the story that he'll be like, gulp, 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 gulp. Go walk and do it. And it stopped because some people were complaining, first of all, how retarded is that part of my language of, you're a guy making $100,000 a year, you have a car and vehicle, you're forcing your kid to pick up milk like it's the 1930s, and then you're going to raise hell if they don't do that, and whatever, really, and then also, like I said, my prior example of how I was forced to go to work and walk, 6 miles to and from work, really, and my dad would not pick me up, or sometimes he would have a babysitter or babysit my younger brother, and he's like, well, she doesn't have a car seat by her, and you need to make a sacrifice for your younger brother. And I even wrote a memoir about that. I remember just being so dehydrated that I was having a psychedelic trip, really. And some people were seeing me walk, and then they drove me home, really. And then that stopped because of all that, really. But my dad was saying, oh, well, I thought Byron was smart enough to ask people, or I know somebody was going to pick him up, really. And it was just that I had a mental illness. My parents thought that I was autistic, and they're like, oh, well, I'll take advantage of him by having him walk, 6 or 7 miles. And mind you that I'm a teenager and anything could have happened to me, where I could have been picked up by a pervert, or I could have been hit by somebody or whatever, really. And then saying something like, oh, well, I know that somebody would have picked him up anyway. or I know that he would have practiced his social skills and all that. No, it's just my dad's way of, covering his ass. And that's kind of what we're seeing with Jennifer in this video. So it's very unfortunate that happens. And there's a lot of and that's neglect, and that's putting your child in danger, especially if they have a mental health issue where they're way more vulnerable. So there's child neglect in that. And then I would also kind of say that this is also what happens with a lot of people who have disabilities, that their parents take advantage of them. And I think that she's taken advantage of him, and they don't know that that leads to low self-esteem, or that may make a kid feel like, oh, well, my parents see me as stupid and manipulable, and they don't care about my safety. And I've grown up with thinking of suicide for a lot of years. I've grown up with depression. I've grown up with low self-esteem. I've grown up with a lot of anger issues because of the times my parents took advantage of me or played me for stupid. And I really think that that's going to be Bo's situation as well, really. Like, his mom is playing him for stupid, really. The other thing is, like I've said, that sometimes parents justify in their brains that, oh, well, my kid has a disability. Sometimes he's hard to deal with. It's like having a toddler It's like having a toddler in your entire life, really, where it's like, there's days that are easier than others, and there's days where you want to pull your hair out, and it's not like, a regular child where, like, after 5 or 6 years old, the tantrums and the bad behavior is going to go away, really. So I can understand, like, how she feels, but it is taking advantage of him. And I do want to talk about the follow-up video where, he and his mom is appearing. It's exactly what I've said, that you do not know how honest that video is, because more than likely they had a couple of conversations beforehand. More than likely she reasoned with him, and it was really about her narrative. There's really no sense of feeling like it was a fair, interview by both of them. She could have said to him, well, you're going to say this, you're going to say that, or we're going to focus just on your behavior. And I've dealt with a lot of narcissists in my life. I've dealt with narcissistic parents. I've dealt with the 40-hour film project, where I've dealt with narcissism abuse and other things like that. That a lot of narcissists will do that, where they'll be like, okay, I did wrong, but that doesn't matter. That's not on the news report. We're only going to focus on what you did, and we're going to focus on what you did and how there are consequences for your actions, really. We're not going to focus on the parent, really. So I really don't believe that she's learned anything for this. I don't believe that Bo is going to be in a situation where he's going to, where this is something like that could possibly happen again, really. So I think that's very unfortunate. And I also just think that, she just doesn't give a shit, and I don't think she's going to be held accountable. Like, this will not change anything unless she has her kids removed and she's forced to do parenting classes, and then the kids are brought back, really, because I don't think this is a situation where they need to be removed permanently. I think they need to be removed for a couple months, and she needs parenting classes and community service to say, hey, you don't abandon a kid with autism. And ultimately, this is why, you wear a condom, and this is why, you do pre-testing, and you're like, oh, well, there's a higher chance that this kid's going to have disabilities, and if they're too much to deal with, you either have an abortion or, not a good option, but you put them up for adoption, really, and be like, okay, I can't handle this kid because they have so many issues. But obviously, adoption is a bad thing as well, really, because, you're creating kids and you're putting them into the foster care system. But when you ever have your kids, it's a lottery ticket. You can have a kid that's like Michael Jackson, where they become this big celebrity and you're making money off your kid, or you can have a kid like Bo who has autism, really, and there are kids with other disabilities or physical disabilities or cancer, or they're in the hospital all the time, and then you have to do extra work with them, and Bo is a human being, really, so it's not trying to say that it's a detriment to have a person with a disability. That's just, that's the probability of being born. You're going to get any type of person. You can have a person with a lot of great physical health and a good mind on their shoulders. You can get a person with maybe a disability or whatever, really, but ultimately you got to treat your kids like human beings, really, and you got to take accountability when you did wrong. And she did wrong. She should not have abandoned a kid with a disability. And if he was being stubborn and defiant, that's part of being a parent. That's just, you got to tolerate that. Or even, like, if you wanted to take as far as just drive off without him, just like maybe a few hundred feet to get him to run and get into the car and get his shit together, that's fine. But just overall abandoning him and going home and gaslighting about that is where the line is crossed, really, because then once he's not in your line of vision and his mental health issues, it's easy for him to be taken advantage of. And we don't want to see that happen, because, again, he could be being picked up by, Herbert the pervert, Or like I saw in another video, like there's this kid with mental illness, and gang members are putting guns in his mouth, aiming guns at him, and chasing him and smacking him and whatever. Really, we want to have him the bow really. And then also too, in the woods of Texas, in the fields of Texas, there's a lot of people not being responsible. There are pit bulls or dogs could be roaming around. There could also be wolves or other animals that can bite him or whatever, really, and all that stuff, and then if that happened, hypothetically, then, obviously the kids will be removed, really, so I know we want to send messages to our kids. We want to also illustrate that sometimes they're fucking frustrating, but importantly, we got to keep our composure together. And if you don't have good composure skills, or people are too frustrated, and you do what I do, and you just don't, you use it for recreation, not procreation.